If you've ever thought about exploring an abandoned school, just know it is not safe. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life a couple months ago when some friends and I decided to explore an abandoned school on a road trip. But what started as just curiosity turned into one of the most terrifying nights of my life after we heard a noise that seemed innocent but would later prove to not be. So let's start from the beginning. What would you do if you saw a massive creepy building in the middle of nowhere during a road trip? Because that's exactly what me and my friends saw when we were driving from Los Angeles to Vegas. We were in the middle of a long road trip and bored out of our minds from how long the drive was when suddenly my friend who was driving slams on the brake and goes, "What is that?" So we all look to where he's pointing and see an absolute massive abandoned building in the middle of nowhere. So of course, it sparked our curiosity right away. Considering the fact that we still had a couple hours before getting to our destination, we thought this was a good place to stop and stretch our legs. So we all agreed we should go check it out. But we had no idea how much further we would go than just checking it out. Because at first, none of us knew what it was. We all had our guesses. One of my friends thought it was an old shopping mall. One of them thought it was an old abandoned government building. Because this place looked like a spirit Halloween when it's not October. There could have been a sign on the outside of it that said free candy inside, and I would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. And my big back still would have fell for it too. So none of us had any idea what we were looking at. But the closer we got to it, the more intriguing it became. Because there were vines growing up the side of the building, making it look like it hasn't been touched in years. So all signs pointed to this place being abandoned. Spoiler alert, it was not. Because as we got out of the car to walk up to this place, we finally figured out what it was. Through one of the dirty windows, we could see rows of desks and a chalkboard. Oh my gosh. It's an abandoned school. And something about seeing a place like this, where you know kids used to go to school inside there, and now it being completely empty, felt really off. And that feeling would only get stronger as time went on. By the way, if you see me sweating, it's because I filmed these videos in my closet, and it's so hot today. But whatever, time to lock in again. So we spent about 10 minutes walking around the outside of the building, looking through each window. We could see empty classrooms with desks still arranged in a neat order. There was a hallway with lockers lining the walls, some of them still open. And then in what looked like a cafeteria, there were tables and chairs scattered all around. It was really strange because this place almost felt as if all the students just got up one day, left, and never came back. This was the first thing that didn't make sense, because why would a school just shut down without anything being done to it? And also, we were kind of in the middle of nowhere. So why would there be a school in this location at all? There were a lot of questions we had, but the answer to all these was not what we expected. Because the whole time we're walking around the outside, my gut is telling me that something's just off about this place. But all my friends wanted to go inside. And if there's one thing about me, if my friends are down to do something, I'm down to do it too. Like if you asked if I wanted to go skydiving into a volcano, I would say absolutely not. But the moment my friend goes, "Hey, we're going skydiving into a volcano tomorrow, wanna come?" I'm there. I'm down for anything. So now that we decided we wanted to check out this place, it was time to find a way inside. And that was pretty easy, because as we were walking around, we noticed a place where a door was supposed to be was just completely missing. Kind of weird if you ask me, right? But at the time, I just rolled with it. When we first stepped inside, I remember thinking that this would just be a quick look around. We'd check out a few rooms, take some pictures thinking that we'd gain so much aura from them, when in reality, we just looked chopped, and then get back on the road. But unfortunately, I was wrong. It started out normal going inside. It was anything you would expect from an abandoned building. But you know that feeling when you realize you might have made a huge mistake? That's exactly what hit me about 15 minutes after we walked into this abandoned school. Because we were checking out what seemed to be the main office when suddenly I heard it, a beeping sound. Not loud, but definitely electronic. It almost sounded like when your smoke detector battery is dying, but it was more consistent. So I stopped what I was doing and listened. Hey guys, do you hear that? They all went quiet, and now everyone could hear it. Beep, beep, beep. Now, I knew it was real. The sound was really strange because it echoed off all the empty walls and made it impossible to find out where it was coming from. We tried walking in different directions to see if it got louder or softer, but it seemed to be the same volume no matter where we went. It was almost like the sound was bouncing around the whole building. And this is when our whole vibe started to change. We went from being excited to explore this new place to now being confused and a little bit worried. None of us had a good answer for what this sound could have been. One of my friends thought it could have possibly been a security camera noise. And if you guys remember the abandoned mansion video, trust me, we did not want to run into any security. But that theory went out the window after something else happened. And this is where it got really weird. The beeping went on for around a minute, super consistently. But then, it just stopped. Complete silence. We all looked at each other like, okay, that was strange, but maybe it's over now. So we kept exploring. We checked out the gymnasium, which was huge and still had basketball hoops hanging from the ceiling. But then about 5 minutes later, the beeping started again. But this time, it only lasted for a few seconds before stopping. That's when we all started to get genuinely spooked. The pattern made no sense. Why would it start beeping for a minute, then stop, then suddenly start again for 5 seconds. We tried to convince ourselves it maybe was just old building systems. Maybe there was a backup generator that was working somewhere. Or it really could have been a smoke detector. But none of these explanations felt right. The timing was too random. The worst part was not knowing what we were dealing with. If it was just old building systems, then fine. We could ignore it and keep exploring. But if someone else was actually in there with us, we needed to know who and where they were. After the third time the beeping happened, we needed to make a decision. We could either leave and always wonder what that beeping sound was, or we could go to the source and finally figure it out to put our minds at ease. We weren't quite ready to sit on the road trip for another 5 hours, so we decided to go with option 2. Let me just tell you, that was not the right decision. Because we decided to split up into pairs to cover more ground. My friends and I went toward one side, while the other two went in the opposite direction. The plan was to text each other if anyone heard the beeping sound get louder on their side. We checked room after room, listening carefully for any electronic sounds. Empty classrooms just stared back at us with their broken desks. Some rooms had old teaching materials scattered over the floor, math worksheets from ages ago, and every time we opened a door, my heart would be racing, thinking that this could be the room where we find the source. Then it happened again. The beeping started up. But this time, it sounded like it was coming from a completely different direction than what we heard previously. So Jake looked at me with this confused expression on his face. I swear it was coming from the other side before, but now it sounds like it's coming from upstairs. That's when we started to wonder if whatever was making the sound was moving around the building. Like someone was carrying whatever device was making this noise. Then, my phone buzzes, and it's a text from the other two saying, "We heard the noise clearer. It sounds like it's coming from upstairs." We finally started to consider the possibility that we weren't alone in this building. What if someone was just walking around with a phone or something? That wouldn't have been good. Because if someone was actually doing this, they probably knew that we were there too. We were pretty loud when we walked in, so there's no way they wouldn't have heard us. But also think about it this way. If there's someone in an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, would you want to run into them? I wouldn't, but there was no cars outside this place or anything, so it just brought more mystery to the situation. We decided to meet back up and search together after we agreed that the sound was coming from upstairs. The four of us regrouped in the main hallway, and then we took the stairs up. Every step felt dangerous. I kept looking behind us to make sure that no one was following, and just as we got to the top of the stairs, the beeping sound started again. But this time, we were sure it was coming from the second floor. Once we got to the top, classrooms lined down the hallways on both sides. All of them had their doors closed. That's when the paranoia really started to kick in. Every single closed door could have had a person hiding behind it. We moved slowly down the hall, all right next to each other, and I know we were all thinking the same thing. If someone dangerous pops out, we're using the other person as a human shield. Or maybe they weren't thinking that, but I sure was. So we'd stop by every room to listen for that beeping noise. My hands were shaking as I reached for the door handles. I just watched the new Final Destination movie, and after seeing all the different ways that you could get hurt, I never would have done any of this if I saw that before. But we got about halfway down the hall when the beeping started again. It was definitely coming from one of the rooms at the end. My friend pointed towards a door that was slightly open with darkness behind it. That one. We all nodded and started walking towards it. Every step felt like we were walking into a trap. Then we heard it. Footsteps. But not our footsteps. Different sounds coming from inside that room. And they were heavy, almost as if someone was stomping on the ground. We all froze, because now we knew someone was definitely in that room. And someone who probably knew we were coming right after them. Were the noises on purpose to lure us over there? We had no idea. What do you think is scarier? Finding someone where you expect to see them, or not finding anyone at all when you do? I'm about to make an argument for why the second option is way worse. Because when we finally mustered up the... Okay, I'm gonna stop doing that. When we finally mustered up the courage to go inside that room, we pushed through the door all at the same time, ready to face whatever was waiting for us. But after opening it, the room was empty. Now the questions were starting to multiply. There were definitely footsteps. That could not have been mistaken for anything else. No chance. We all stood there looking around, completely clueless, just waiting for someone to jump out at us. But there was literally nowhere to hide. The room was bare. And after being so worried about the sounds we were hearing, all of a sudden, it was the absence of sound that started to really scare us. The beeping sound had completely stopped. The footsteps that we heard just a few moments ago was nowhere to be seen. It was so quiet you could hear a fly fart. At least when there was beeping, we knew something was happening. Now, we had no idea what was going on. We walked around the entire room, checking every corner. We even checked the ceiling like maybe someone was hiding in the tiles up there. We looked through the windows to see if someone could have possibly jumped out of them, but there was no way. They wouldn't have made it. The confusion was eating at all of us. But then, we thought of a really interesting theory. What if all the noises we had just been hearing were coming from a speaker and not someone at all. Like someone was just using a speaker to play all those noises and prank us, or maybe to warn us to get out. That could have explained the sound of the footsteps too. This was our best guess at the moment, but the reality was much more complex than we ever could have thought, because the panic started to settle in when we realized we might be dealing with something that we can't predict its next move. If there was a person in the building, at least we knew what we were dealing with, but this felt like we were being messed with by something that's invisible. Like we were trapped in some type of game where we didn't even know the rules. And what do you do when you're playing a game that you know you can't win? You quit. So that's what we did. We decided to leave. We were gonna walk back downstairs, out the building, through the fence, and get in the car. No more exploring, no more trying to figure out whatever those noises were. We just wanted to get back on the road and pretend none of this ever happened. So we made it to the staircase and started heading back down towards the first floor. By the way, keep in mind, I was fine with doing this. I didn't care as much as the others to figure out what that noise was. I just wasn't trying to get abducted by any aliens. Unless the aliens are like interested in me, then in that case, hit me up. But as we're going back towards the car, I realized we had a 5-hour road trip coming up and I really needed to use the bathroom. And I didn't think it would be a good idea to pee my pants for the 3rd time that day, so I told my friends I was gonna use the bathroom in the school and I would meet them by the exit. I had no idea that this bathroom visit would change everything we knew about this abandoned school. Because as I'm doing my business in the bathroom, I noticed something on the sink that makes me start to shake. A soda can. But not just any soda can. One that was clearly opened very recently. How did I know? It was still fizzing. I could hear the tiny bubbles popping at the surface. So my brain started to go crazy trying to figure this out. Carbonation doesn't last that long once you open a can, maybe a few hours at most. This meant someone had opened this can today. And more likely, it was in the past few hours. All those electronic beeping sounds, the footsteps we heard upstairs, suddenly it felt like we weren't alone again. Someone else was definitely in this building with us. And they weren't just passing through. No, they were comfortable enough to open a soda can in the bathroom and just chill. That meant they probably knew the building pretty well. But wait, if the soda can was still fizzing, that meant if someone was actually in here, they were probably really close by. And that's when I heard something that made my heart drop. A shuffling sound come from one of the bathroom stalls. It was quiet, but it was definitely there. Like someone shifting their weight, trying to get comfortable while trying to stay hidden. I froze completely. Part of me wanted to run out and never act like any of this happened. But I was also terrified that if I moved, whoever just made that noise would know that I discovered them. The shuffling sound happened again. Definitely coming from the last stall at the end. The door was closed, but there was a gap at the bottom so I could see if anyone's feet was under there. And you know I like my feet. Sorry. So I bent down slowly and quietly and I looked. What did I see? Shoes. Beat up sneakers pointed toward the stall door as if someone was using the toilet. I had to make a choice. I could either run away, let this person stay in the bathroom stall and hope they don't come after me, or I could find out who they were and what they really wanted. And obviously, I needed a good YouTube video, so I tried to figure out who they were. No, I'm just kidding. That's not why I did it. I love you guys, but I ain't doing that for y'all. The real reason I wanted to figure out what was beyond that door is because this person clearly already heard us. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm 3 feet away from them. If they wanted to do something to me, I'm already cooked. So I might as well just see what's in there. So I took a breath and knocked on the door softly. Hey, I know you're in there. After a couple seconds, the door slowly opens and this guy peeks out at me. He looked rough, like he hadn't showered in weeks, which isn't that weird because I haven't showered at all this year. But still, his hair was all messy and his clothes were dirty and wrinkled. But the look on his face wasn't scary or threatening. He just looked absolutely terrified. Like he was more afraid of me than I was of him. So we both just stared at each other for a few seconds, not knowing what to say. Then he finally opens his mouth. Please don't call the cops. I'm not causing any trouble, I promise. That's when I realized this guy wasn't some crazy person or a criminal. He was just scared and trying to hide from something. The tension in the room completely changed. Instead of being scared of each other, we started to relax a little bit now. And then he told me his whole story. His name was David. And David had been homeless for about 6 months. And apparently, he had been living in this abandoned school for a while because it was dry and relatively safe. The police had already kicked him out twice before, so when he heard people inside the building, he just assumed it was them again, and he ran. That's why he hid when he heard us exploring earlier. Then came the explanation that solved our biggest mystery, the beeping sound. After asking him about this, it turns out it was his microwave. He had this little portable microwave that he used to heat up food, and it kept beeping every time his Hot Pockets were ready. And if you've ever had a Hot Pocket before, you know that it can be 5 million degrees on the outside, but still ice cold on the inside. So he kept having to heat them up. That's why the beeping sounds would start, and then stop, and then start again. So I brought my friends over to the bathroom, and we explained the whole situation together. And now, I'm using this experience as an excuse to never go inside a school again.